The phone buzzed against the mahogany nightstand at exactly 6:30 in the morning. It was a harsh and mechanical sound that sliced through the silence of our master bedroom. I groaned and reached out blindly with one hand. My fingers brushed against the cool glass of my water bottle before finding the device. I squinted at the screen. The number was unfamiliar. It was a local New York area code, but not one I had saved in my contacts. A strange knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. As a chief financial officer for one of the largest logistics firms in Manhattan, I was used to early calls. But those calls usually came from my assistant or frantic overseas partners. This felt different. My intuition, which had saved me millions of dollars in bad investments over the years, pricked at the back of my neck. I slid my thumb across the screen to answer. "Hello," I whispered, trying not to wake the man sleeping beside me. "Good morning. This is the Apex Realty Group. May I speak to Mrs. May I? Elena Sterling." The voice on the other end was professional and bright. Too bright for this hour. I sat up slowly and pulled the silk sheet up to my chest. Speaking. "Who is this? We received an urgent request to appraise your condominium at 1281 Bayview Street, Unit 22B. The request specified that we should call early to schedule a walkthrough for this afternoon. When would be a good time for our agent to visit the property?" I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I stared at the wall opposite the bed where a piece of expensive, abstract art hung. "I am sorry, but you must have the wrong number. I did not request an appraisal. I have no intention of selling this unit." There was a pause on the other end. I heard the distinct clicking of a keyboard. "One moment, please, Mrs. Sterling. Our records show the request was submitted yesterday evening around 7 o'clock. It was submitted by a Mr. Caleb Sterling. He identified himself as your husband and stated that the owner was looking to liquidate the asset immediately." My heart stopped. It literally felt as if it skipped 2 full beats. I looked down at Caleb. My husband was fast asleep. He lay on his back with one arm thrown carelessly over his eyes to shield them from the sliver of morning light creeping through the curtains. He looked peaceful. He looked perfect. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. With his tousled dark hair and that sharp jawline, he looked like the man every woman in her 30s dreamed of finding. He was the charming architect who loved jazz and cooked Italian food on Sundays. He was the man who had swept me off my feet 14 months ago, and apparently he was the man trying to sell my home behind my back. I took a deep breath and kept my voice steady. "There has been a misunderstanding. Please cancel the request. Do not call this number again." I hung up before the woman could argue. I tossed the phone onto the duvet and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. I needed to think. I needed to separate the emotional wife from the analytical CFO. To the outside world, and specifically to Caleb, this apartment did not belong to me. That was the lie I had told on our second date. It was the lie I had maintained through our courtship, our engagement, and our 6 months of marriage. I bought this condominium 5 years ago. I paid $2.4 million for it after receiving a massive performance bonus. It was my trophy. It was my fortress. After clawing my way up the corporate ladder in a male-dominated industry, this home was the physical proof of my success. But experience had taught me that success attracted parasites. Before Caleb, I had dated men who seemed wonderful until they saw my bank account. I had dated a struggling artist who needed a gallery opening fee. I had dated a consultant who needed a bridge loan. I had been burned enough times to learn that money changes the dynamic of love. So when I met Caleb at a charity gala, I decided to protect myself. I invented Aunt Meredith. According to the story I fed Caleb, Aunt Meredith was my late mother's eccentric sister. She was fabulously wealthy, but plagued by a severe heart condition that kept her confined to a specialized clinic in Zurich, Switzerland. I told him that Aunt Meredith allowed me to live in her New York property to keep it occupied, but she could return or sell it at a moment's notice. It was a brilliant cover. It explained why I lived in luxury, but it kept the asset out of reach. It made me look like a fortunate niece rather than a wealthy target. But now the lie was being tested. Why would Caleb try to appraise Aunt Meredith's apartment? He knew it was not ours. He knew we were guests here. Unless he thought he could manipulate the situation. The mattress shifted. I stiffened. Caleb stretched and groaned a low, sleepy sound that used to make me smile. He rolled over and draped a heavy arm across my waist. His skin was warm. "Who was that on the phone, babe?" His voice was thick with sleep. I froze. I had a split second to decide how to play this. If I screamed at him now, he would panic and cover his tracks. If I played it cool, I might find out what he was planning. It was a wrong number. I lied. My voice sounded calm. Too calm. Caleb hummed and buried his face in the crook of my neck. He kissed the sensitive skin below my ear. At 6:30 in the morning. That is rude. People have no manners these days. It was a real estate agency. I said it clearly and felt his body tense against mine. It was a subtle reaction, a tiny rigidness in his muscles that vanished as quickly as it appeared. But I felt it. "Oh, really?" He pulled back slightly to look at me. His hazel eyes were clear now. Innocent. Too innocent. What did they want? They wanted to schedule an appraisal. They said a request was made to sell the unit. Caleb let out a short laugh. He shook his head and sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Telemarketers are getting aggressive. They probably just scrape data from public records and cold call everyone in the building. I bet the doorman sold the resident list again." "No, Caleb." I turned to face him fully. "They had our specific unit number, and they mentioned your name. They said you called them." For a second, the mask slipped. I saw a flash of genuine fear in his eyes. It was a look of a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, but it was darker. It was calculating. Then just as quickly, the charming smile returned. "Me. That is ridiculous. Why would I call them? It is not even our place to sell. It belongs to your Aunt Meredith." "Exactly." I watched him closely. "So why would they have your name?" He shrugged his shoulders and reached for the glass of water on his nightstand. He took a long sip, buying himself time to think. Maybe it was a mix-up. Or maybe... He paused and looked at me with a sudden expression of concern. "Elena, maybe it is a sign." "A sign?" I asked. "Babe, you know how stressed I have been lately. The construction business is brutal right now. My suppliers are squeezing me, and that project in Brooklyn is bleeding cash. We need capital. Serious capital." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "Here it comes. What are you saying, Caleb?" "I am saying that maybe we should talk to your Aunt Meredith. I mean, really talk to her. Does she even know the market value of this place right now? It is sitting here collecting dust while we are struggling to keep my company afloat. If she sold it and gave us a commission or even a loan, it could save everything." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He was not just asking for help. He was suggesting we liquidate a multi-million-dollar asset that he thought belonged to a sick old woman just to plug the holes in his failing business. And he had already called the realtor. He had already taken the first step without asking me. Without asking the imaginary Aunt Meredith. "Caleb, my aunt, is in a clinic in Switzerland recovering from heart surgery. I am not going to ask her to sell her home because your business is having a bad quarter. It is not just a bad quarter, Elena." His voice rose slightly. The edge of desperation was real now. "I owe people money. Dangerous debt. If I do not come up with $200,000 by the end of the month, things are going to get ugly." $200,000. I repeated the number. It was a specific sum. He grabbed my hands. His palms were sweaty. "Look, I know it is a lot to ask, but she is never coming back here, is she? She is old. She is sick. This place is just a museum to her, but for us it could be a lifeline. We are married, Elena. My problems are your problems. We are a team." I looked at our joined hands. His wedding ring glinted in the morning light. "A team." That is what he said. But a teammate does not call a realtor behind your back at 7 in the evening. A teammate does not try to sell a home that does not belong to him. I pulled my hands away gently. "I need coffee," I said, standing up and grabbing my silk robe. "Elena, wait." Caleb called out, but I was already walking toward the door. I walked down the long hallway to the kitchen. My bare feet made no sound on the polished oak floors. The apartment was silent, but my mind was screaming. He did not just want a loan, he wanted the whole house. He had called the appraiser because he wanted to know exactly how much the pie was worth before he tried to cut himself a slice. I reached the kitchen and pressed the button on the espresso machine. The grinding of the beans was loud and violent. I leaned against the marble counter and looked around my beautiful kitchen. I had designed this space myself. I picked out the Italian tiles. I chose the Sub-Zero fridge. I worked 80-hour weeks for 5 years to pay for this. And Caleb thought he could take it. He thought he was playing a game with a naive niece. He did not realize he was messing with a CFO who spotted fraudulent transactions for a living. I took a sip of the bitter black coffee. He wanted to sell Aunt Meredith's house. Fine. I would let him try. I would let him dig his own grave one shovel of dirt at a time. But first I needed to know exactly how deep the hole was. I pulled my phone from my robe pocket and opened my secure banking app. Then I opened a new browser tab and typed in the name of a private investigator I had used for corporate background checks. If Caleb wanted a war, he was going to get one. But he would not be fighting the sweet wife he thought he knew. He would be fighting the owner. And the owner was not selling. The silence in our apartment over the next 3 days was not peaceful. It was heavy and suffocating like the air before a thunderstorm. Caleb moved through the rooms with the weight of a martyr. He slumped his shoulders when he thought I was looking. He sighed loudly while staring at his phone during dinner. He left half-finished plates of food on the counter to signal his distress. It was a performance. I knew it was a performance because I had seen him checking his reflection in the hallway mirror to perfect his look of exhaustion before entering the living room. But knowing it was an act did not make it easier to watch. It made my stomach churn with a mixture of anger and betrayal. On Thursday evening, the storm finally broke. I was sitting at the kitchen island reviewing a quarterly report for my firm when the front door slammed shut. The sound echoed off the high ceilings. Caleb walked in. He looked disheveled. His tie was loosened and his top button was undone. He carried a leather portfolio under his arm, and his face was a mask of tragic despair. He did not say hello. He marched straight to the kitchen and dropped the portfolio onto the marble countertop with a heavy thud. "We are done, Elena," he said. His voice cracked perfectly. "We are finished." I slowly closed my laptop and looked at him. "What are you talking about, Caleb?" He opened the portfolio and scattered a handful of papers across the island. They fanned out over the pristine surface. Invoices, final notices, threatening letters from suppliers. "Look at this." He pointed a shaking finger at a document printed on bright red paper. "I just came from a meeting with my main concrete supplier. They are pulling the plug. If I do not pay the outstanding balance by Monday morning, they are filing a lawsuit and putting a lien on the business assets. It is over. Everything I built, everything we dreamed of, gone." I picked up the red paper. I picked up the letterhead belonged to a company called Tri-State Concrete. The amount due was staggering, $200,000. I read the number aloud. "I need $200,000 to stop the bleeding," he said. He leaned his hands on the counter and hung his head. "If I do not get it, I declare bankruptcy next week. And do you know what happens then? The creditors come after everything. They will ruin my credit. They will ruin our reputation." I kept my face neutral, but my mind was racing. I scanned the document. As a CFO, I dealt with invoices every single day. I knew what a professional demand for payment looked like. This looked correct at first glance, but something about the font spacing felt amateurish. "Caleb." "I have some savings," I said carefully. "I can liquidate my investment portfolio. I can give you maybe $50,000 by Monday." He laughed. It was a bitter, sharp sound. $50,000. That is a drop in the bucket, Elena. It is an insult. "I need $200,000 just to keep the lights on. Then we can apply for a business loan," I said. "With my credit score and your current contracts, we could—" "No." He slammed his hand on the counter. I flinched. "No more loans. I am leveraged to the hilt. No bank will touch me right now." He looked around the apartment. His eyes swept over the crystal chandelier, the custom cabinetry, and the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city skyline. "We are sitting in a gold mine, Elena," he said softly. His voice dropped to a whisper that was meant to sound seductive but sounded predatory. "We are living in a place worth millions." I stiffened. Here it is. Caleb, I said warningly. Don, not Caleb, me. He snapped. He straightened up and the sad victim vanished, replaced by an angry accuser. Look at this place. It is enormous. It is luxurious. And who does it belong to? Your Aunt Meredith, a woman who has not set foot in this country for 5 years. A woman who is lying in a hospital bed in Zurich, probably drooling on her pillow while we scramble for scraps. That is disrespectful. She is my family. She is letting us live here rent-free. Rent-free, he scoffed. We pay the maintenance fees. We pay the utilities. We are caretakers, Elena. We are glorified house sitters. And for what? So she can keep a museum for her ghosts. It is selfish. It is incredibly selfish of her to hoard this wealth while her niece is watching her husband drown. I felt a cold rage bubbling in my chest. He was talking about my hard work, my sacrifice, as if it were wasted space. She does not know you are drowning, Caleb, I said calmly. And even if she did, this is her asset, not ours. But it could be ours. He walked around the island and stood next to me. He invaded my personal space, looming over me. Elena, think about it. You handle her affairs here. You said she trusts you completely. Does she even check the paperwork anymore? What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that we sell it. We sell it fast to a cash buyer. I know people. I know investors who would snap this up in a heartbeat without asking too many questions. We take the money, we pay off my debts, we buy a nice modest house in the suburbs, and we put the rest in an account for her. Or... He paused and looked me dead in the eye. Or we just tell her the market crashed and we had to sell to save the equity. She is sick, Elena. She probably will not even notice. You want me to commit fraud? I asked. My voice was ice cold. You want me to forge her signature and sell her property without her consent? I want you to save us. He yelled. The sudden volume made me jump. Why are you so obsessed with protecting her? She is an old woman who has lived her life. I am your husband. I am the one sleeping in your bed. I am the one trying to build a future for us. But you are so cold. You are like a robot. You care more about this stupid apartment than you care about me. That is not true. It feels true. He poked a finger into my shoulder. It was a hard, aggressive poke. You are selfish, Elena. You sit here in your designer clothes, drinking your expensive wine, acting like you are better than everyone else. But when the chips are down, you won't lift a finger to help the man you married. You are letting me fail. You are choosing a building over a human being. This was gaslighting in its purest form. He was twisting reality, making me the villain in a drama he had manufactured. He was using my own success against me, painting my prudence as cruelty. If I were truly the dependent niece living on my aunt's charity, his words might have broken me. I might have felt guilty. I might have questioned my own morality. But I was the owner, and I knew exactly how much the maintenance fees were because I paid them from my private account. I knew the utilities were auto-paid. He was lying about everything. I stood up. I was wearing 3-inch heels, which put me almost at eye level with him. I am not selfish, Caleb, I said, and I am not a criminal. I will not forge documents. I will not sell property that is not mine. If you need $200,000, we will find another way. But this apartment is off the table. Do you understand me? He stared at me. His jaw worked as he ground his teeth. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. The violence was radiating off him in waves. But then he sneered. Fine, he spat. Keep your precious fortress, but do not come crying to me when I lose the company. Do not expect me to be the happy husband when my life is falling apart because my wife was too cowardly to act. He grabbed the bottle of scotch from the bar cart and stormed out of the kitchen. A moment later, the door to the guest bedroom slammed shut and the lock clicked. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. My heart was pounding against my ribs. My hands were trembling not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the confrontation. He had called me a coward. He had called me selfish. I looked down at the red invoice on the counter. Tri-State Concrete. Amount due, $200,000. I picked up the paper. Now that he was gone, I could look closer. I walked to my home office and locked the door. I sat down at my desk and turned on my high-powered workstation. I did not open my work email. Instead, I opened a forensic accounting software I used for complex audits. First, I ran a search for Tri-State Concrete. The company existed, it had a website, it had a listed address in New Jersey, but when I checked the state business registry, the filing date was recent. Too recent. The company had been incorporated only 3 months ago. I cross-referenced the address on the invoice. It was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Newark. I pulled up the joint bank account Caleb and I shared. It was the account where he deposited his salary and where I deposited a portion of mine for household expenses. But Caleb also had a business account that he had added me to when we first got married. He had done it to show off to prove he was a transparent modern man. He probably thought I never checked it because the balances were always low. I logged into his business banking portal. I scrolled through the transactions for the last 6 months. There were payments to suppliers, there were payroll withdrawals, but there were also transfers. Large, jagged transfers that did not fit the pattern of a construction firm. $10,000 on May 4th, $15,000 on June 1st, $12,000 on July 10th. The recipient was listed simply as PA Consulting. I clicked on the digital image of the canceled checks for those transfers. The handwriting was messy, but legible. The memo line on one check said, "Consulting fees." I ran a search for PA. Consulting. Nothing. No website. No LinkedIn profile. But then I looked at the endorsement stamp on the back of the digital check image. It was faint, but I could make out the name of the receiving bank. It was a small credit union in Yonkers. I sat back in my chair. Yonkers. That was where Caleb's mother Pamela lived. Pamela Amara, PA Consulting. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It was not a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a hunter who had just found fresh tracks in the snow. He did not owe money to a concrete company. He was siphoning money out of his own business and hiding it with his mother. He was intentionally bleeding his company dry to create a crisis. He was manufacturing a bankruptcy so he could beg me for money. And the $200,000 he wanted from the sale of the condo, that would not go to creditors. That would go straight into the pockets of PA Consulting. I looked at the invoice again. I noticed something else. The tax identification number at the bottom was missing a digit. A real company would never make that mistake. It was a clumsy forgery. Caleb was not just a liar, he was a thief, and he was not working alone. I opened a new folder on my secure cloud drive. I named it Project Zora, after the aunt I had invented. I scanned the fake invoice. I downloaded the bank statements. I took screenshots of the PA Consulting transfers. "You want to play the victim, Caleb," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to call me selfish." I typed a quick email to my contact at the bank asking for a deeper trace on the Yonkers account. I would let him play his game a little longer. I would let him think his gaslighting was working. I would let him believe I was the cold, selfish wife who needed to be guilted into submission. Because the more desperate he got, the more mistakes he would make. And when he finally made the fatal mistake, I would be ready. I would not just divorce him, I would destroy him. I closed the laptop and walked back to the master bedroom. I could hear Caleb snoring in the guest room. He was sleeping soundly, probably dreaming of the millions he thought he was about to steal. I climbed into my own bed. I did not sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. The gaslighting had failed, but it had given me something invaluable. It had given me the truth. They were not just coming for the house, they were coming for everything, and I was the only thing standing in their way. The truce after our fight lasted exactly 36 hours. It was a fragile silence built on unspoken resentments and separate sleeping arrangements. I stayed in the master suite, and Caleb camped in the guest room nursing his wounded ego and his secret financial schemes. Then the phone rang again. This time it was 12:15 in the morning. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed aggressively in the dark. I heard Caleb's phone ringing in the other room, followed by the muffled sound of his voice. A moment later, the door to my bedroom creaked open. "Elena." His voice was urgent, stripped of the anger from the previous day. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. "Elena, wake up. It is Mom." I sat up and switched on the lamp. I blinked against the sudden brightness. What happened? Is she okay? It is her apartment in Yonkers. A pipe burst in the unit above her. The ceiling collapsed in the living room. She says there is water everywhere. She is hysterical. I looked at him. His face was pale and his eyes were wide with genuine panic. Or perhaps he was just a better actor than I gave him credit for. My mind instantly flashed back to the suspicious transfers to PA Consulting. Was this part of the plan? Was this phase 2? Is she hurt? I asked, getting out of bed. No, but the place is uninhabitable. The landlord turned off the power and the water. She has nowhere to go. I knew what was coming next. I could feel the trap snapping shut around me, but I had no way to avoid it without looking like a heartless monster. Tell her to pack a bag, I said, keeping my voice steady. Go pick her up. She can stay here. Caleb let out a breath of relief that seemed almost too theatrical. Thank you, Elena. I know things are tense right now, but she is family. I will go get her. He grabbed his keys and left. I stood in the center of the bedroom and listened to the front door close. Family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I went to the kitchen to make tea, not because I was thirsty, but because I needed to prepare for the invasion. If my theory was correct, Pamela Amara was not coming here because of a burst pipe. She was coming here to occupy territory. 2 hours later, Caleb returned. He was carrying 3 massive suitcases. I stared at the luggage. 3 suitcases for a temporary stay, I asked. She was afraid of looting. Caleb grunted, hauling the heavy bags into the foyer. She packed everything valuable. Pamela followed him in. She was a petite woman with sharp features and hair that was dyed a severe jet black. She wore a soaking wet raincoat, though I was fairly certain it was not raining outside. She looked around the foyer, her dark eyes scanning the marble floors and the custom lighting fixtures with a hunger she did not bother to hide. Elena. She sighed and walked toward me. Her shoes left muddy prints on the rug. Thank you for opening your home. It is a tragedy, a complete tragedy. My beautiful sofa is ruined. I am sorry to hear that, Pamela, I said, allowing her to give me a stiff, brief hug. The guest room is ready for you. She pulled back and looked at me. Her gaze lingered on my silk robe. Oh, the guest room, she said softly. It is a bit small, is it not? I get claustrophobic easily, especially after such a trauma. It has a queen bed and an ensuite bathroom, Pamela. It is larger than most studio apartments in the city. Caleb chimed in quickly. It is fine, Mom. It is just for a few days until the landlord fixes the pipe. Pamela patted his cheek. Of course, sweetie. Just a few days. She turned back to me and smiled. It was a smile that did not reach her eyes. It must be nice, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. To live in such a palace and not have to worry about pipes bursting or landlords. Your aunt is a very lucky woman to own this. And you are very lucky that she lets you play house in it. I smiled back. It was my boardroom smile. The one I used right before I fired someone for incompetence. We are all lucky, Pamela. Now please get some rest. I went back to bed, but I did not sleep. I listened to the sounds of them whispering in the kitchen. They were plotting. I was sure of it. The next morning, the invasion began in earnest. I left for work early, wanting to avoid breakfast with them. When I returned at 6 in the evening, the atmosphere in the apartment had shifted completely. The scent of heavy spices and roasted meat hung in the air, overpowering my usual lavender reed diffusers. I walked into the living room and stopped dead in my tracks. My living room, my sanctuary. It had been rearranged. The sleek gray velvet sofa, which I had positioned to face the skyline view, was now pushed against the wall. The coffee table was cluttered with porcelain figurines that definitely did not belong to me. And the curtains. The beautiful sheer linen curtains I had imported from Belgium were gone. In their place hung heavy dark floral drapes that looked like they belonged in a funeral home. I felt a vein throb in my temple. Pamela, I called out. She emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She was wearing house slippers and looking very comfortable. Hello, dear. You are home late. Dinner is almost ready. Where are my curtains? I asked, pointing at the window. Oh, those thin things. She waved a dismissive hand. I took them down. They were letting in too much light. It was fading the rug. Plus, the energy was all wrong. Too much exposure. You need privacy to keep the wealth inside the home. It is an old superstition. You took down my curtains. I repeated, speaking slowly. I folded them nicely and put them in the closet, she said, stepping closer. Her tone shifted from casual to patronizing. Do not be so dramatic, Elena. I was just trying to help. This place feels so cold, so empty. It needs a woman's touch, a mother's touch. It has a woman's touch, mine. But it is not really yours, is it? She countered smoothly. It is your Aunt Meredith's, and I am sure if she were here, she would appreciate someone looking after the preservation of her furniture. Sun damage is terrible for velvet. Caleb walked in from the hallway. He saw the tension immediately and stepped between us. Babe, do not start. Mom spent all day cleaning and cooking. She is just trying to make herself useful while she is displaced. She rearranged the furniture, Caleb, I said. She changed the drapes. So what? He shrugged. It looks cozy. I actually like it. It feels more like a home and less like a hotel lobby. I looked at them. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a united front. The gaslighting was expanding. Now it was not just about money. It was about reality. They were rewriting the narrative of my own home, turning me into a guest in my own castle. I took a deep breath. If I fought them on the curtains, they would call me petty. They would say I was mistreating a poor, traumatized old woman. Fine, I said, tight-lipped. Thank you for dinner, Pamela. We sat down to eat. The conversation was a minefield. Pamela dominated the talk, telling long stories about how hard she had worked to raise Caleb after his father died. She painted a picture of sacrifice and poverty, contrasting it sharply with the luxury surrounding us. It is a sin, really, she said, stabbing a piece of roast chicken, to have so much space wasted, 3 bedrooms and only 2 people. And poor Caleb working so hard, drowning in debt while this asset just sits here. Here we go. Mom, Caleb warned, but his voice lacked conviction. No, I will say it. Pamela looked at me, her eyes hard and calculating. I heard about the trouble with the business, Elena. Caleb told me everything. He is a good boy. He does not deserve to fail. He is not going to fail, I said, sipping my wine. We are looking into loan options. Loans. Pamela scoffed. Why take a loan when you are sitting on a gold mine? I do not understand you young people. You hold on to things for sentimental reasons while your lives fall apart. Your Aunt Meredith. She is old, right? She is 72. I lied. 72. Pamela shook her head. And she is alone in Switzerland. Does she even remember she has this place? If she knew her favorite niece was struggling, she would want to help. Unless... She paused, letting the silence stretch. Unless you have not told her. Unless you are keeping her in the dark, because you want to keep living in luxury while my son suffers. I put down my fork. The metal clinked loudly against the china. I am not keeping anyone in the dark. My aunt's health is precarious. Stress could kill her. Or maybe you are just waiting for her to die, Pamela said softly, so you can inherit it all yourself. Is that it, Elena? Are you waiting for the old woman to pass so you can kick Caleb to the curb and live here alone like a queen? That is enough. I stood up. My appetite was gone. I'm going to finish some work. I walked away, leaving them at the table. I could feel their eyes on my back. They were pushing me, poking me, trying to find a weak spot. I went to my home office and closed the door. My hands were shaking. I needed to calm down. I needed to be the CFO, not the angry daughter-in-law. I sat at my desk and turned on my laptop. I worked for 2 hours trying to lose myself in spreadsheets and audit logs. The house grew quiet. Caleb and Pamela had gone to their respective rooms. Around 11 o'clock, I realized I had left my phone in the kitchen. I opened the office door quietly. The hallway was dark. I padded softly toward the kitchen, retrieved my phone, and turned to go back. That was when I heard it. A soft scratching sound. It was coming from my office. I had just left the office less than 2 minutes ago. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. I crept back down the hallway, keeping close to the wall. The door to the office, which I had left slightly ajar, was now pushed open wider. A beam of light from a flashlight cut through the darkness of the room. I stepped into the doorway. Pamela was sitting at my desk. She was not just sitting, she was digging. She had pulled out the bottom drawer, the deep one where I kept tax files and old receipts, but her hand was not shuffling through the folders. Her fingers were prying at the bottom of the drawer, feeling for the hidden latch that released the false bottom. Beneath that false bottom was the original deed to the apartment, the deed that had my name on it. Elena Sterling. Not Aunt Meredith, not a trust. Me. If she found that the game was over, they would know I was the owner. They would know they could sue me for half the asset in a divorce. They would stop trying to get me to sell and start trying to destroy me legally. My breath caught in my throat. Her fingernails scratched against the wood. She was close. She knew something was there. "What are you doing?" My voice rang out sharp and loud in the silence. Pamela jumped. She actually jumped in the chair, dropping the flashlight. It clattered onto the desk and rolled, casting a chaotic beam across the ceiling. She spun around, clutching her chest. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," she gasped. "You scared the life out of me, Elena." I flicked on the overhead switch. The room flooded with a harsh white light. Pamela blinked, squinting. She was wearing a silk nightgown that she must have brought in one of those 3 suitcases. "I asked you what you are doing in my office, Pamela." I walked toward the desk. My voice was low and dangerous. She recovered quickly. The shock on her face was replaced by a look of innocent confusion. She held up a small metal object she had grabbed from the desktop tray. "I was looking for a needle," she said. "A needle." "Yes." A button popped off my nightgown. "I thought you might have a sewing kit in your desk." I looked in the kitchen, but I could not find one. "You were digging in my file drawer, Pamela. You were prying at the bottom of the drawer." "I was not prying." She stood up, smoothing her gown. "I was just checking to see if the kit was buried under these papers." "You are so disorganized, dear." She was lying. She was lying to my face, and she knew that I knew it. There was a glint of defiance in her eyes. She had been searching for something specific. Caleb must have told her about the hidden compartment. He had never seen me open it, but he was an architect. He knew how spaces worked. He might have guessed. "Get out," I said. "Excuse me, get out of my office, now." Pamela sighed and shook her head as if I were a petulant child. "You are so high-strung, Elena. It is the stress. You really need to relax. Good night." She walked past me, radiating a smug superiority. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. "By the way," she said, "you should really organize those files better. If something were to happen to you, nobody would be able to find anything." She smiled and disappeared into the dark hallway. I slammed the door and locked it. My knees felt weak. I sank into the chair she had just vacated. I pulled open the bottom drawer and felt for the latch. I clicked it open and lifted the false bottom. The deed was still there. Safe. But for how long? They were getting bold. They were getting desperate. The invasion was not just about occupying space. It was a search and destroy mission. I took the deed out of the drawer. I could not keep it here anymore, not with Pamela prowling the halls at night. I needed to move the evidence, and I needed to accelerate my plan. Tomorrow I would contact the lawyer, but tonight I slept with the office key under my pillow. The morning after Pamela found my hidden drawer, I moved the deed to a safety deposit box at a bank across town. I did not trust the safe in the apartment anymore. I did not trust the locks. I barely trusted the coffee I drank in my own kitchen. Once the physical evidence was secure, I activated my own offensive strategy. I sat in a quiet booth at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my office and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Sarah. We had been roommates in college, and now she was a senior clerk at the county records office. "Sarah, I need a deep dive," I said, keeping my voice low. "I need to know everything about a woman named Pamela Amara, or possibly Neela Amara. She is from Yonkers." "Is this about the husband?" Sarah asked. She never liked Caleb. She said his smile was too practiced. "Yes. And check him too. Caleb Sterling. Check for marriage licenses, divorce decrees, property transfers, everything. Consider it done," Sarah said. The second call was to Mark. He was a private investigator my firm used for vetting potential board members. He was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly efficient. "I need a background check, Mark. Level 1 priority." I sent him the details and wired a retainer that would have bought a small car. For the next 3 days, I played the part of the busy executive. I went to work. I came home late. I ate Pamela's greasy dinners and endured her passive-aggressive comments about my lack of domestic skills. I watched Caleb pacing the living room, talking loudly on his phone about imaginary suppliers and broken contracts. Then the information started pouring in. Sarah called me on Wednesday afternoon. "Are you sitting down, Elena?" Her voice was serious. "I am in my office." "Go ahead." "Okay, let us start with the mother. Pamela Amara is an alias. Her legal name is Neela Amara. She was a real estate attorney in the 90s. Was. I asked. Was. Sarah confirmed. She was disbarred 15 years ago. It was a huge scandal in the legal community back then. She was caught forging signatures on transfer deeds. She would target elderly clients with no next of kin, facilitate the sale of their properties to shell companies she controlled, and then pocket the proceeds. She served 2 years of a suspended sentence, but she is banned from practicing law or holding a real estate license for life. I felt a cold shiver. It was exactly what I had suspected, but hearing the confirmation was chilling. She was a professional predator. "And Caleb?" I asked. "This is worse, Elena." Sarah hesitated. "You are his third wife." "Third," I whispered. "He told me he had never been married. He said he was waiting for the right one. He lied. He was married 10 years ago to a woman named Beatrice in Ohio. She inherited a farmhouse. 6 months after the wedding, they sold it to invest in his construction business. The business failed. They divorced. She lost everything. And the second one, 7 years ago, a woman named Julianne in Pennsylvania. She owned a townhouse. Same story. They married. He convinced her to refinance the mortgage to pull out equity. The money vanished. He filed for divorce." I stared at the city skyline through my office window. The pattern was mathematical in its precision. Marry, liquidate, abandon. I was just the latest project. Phase 3 in a business plan that had been running for a decade. "Thank you, Sarah," I said. My voice was calm, but my hand was gripping the phone so hard it hurt. "Be careful, Elena. These people do not stop until they feed." I hung up. A moment later, my email pinged. It was the report from Mark. It confirmed everything Sarah had said, but added photos. Mugshots of a younger Neela, court documents from Caleb's divorces. I printed everything. I put the papers in a heavy manila envelope and locked it in my office safe. I had the history. Now I needed to know their current play. That evening, I left work at 6. As I walked to the parking garage, I felt that prickling sensation on the back of my neck again. The feeling of being watched. I stopped at the ticket kiosk and used the reflective glass to look behind me. 50 feet back, a man was pretending to read a newspaper on a bench. He was wearing a beige jacket and a baseball cap. He was average height, average build, forgettable. I paid for my ticket and walked to my car. As I pulled out onto the street, I checked my rearview mirror. A gray sedan pulled out 3 cars behind me. I took a right turn. The sedan took a right. I took 2 lefts, circling the block. The sedan followed. It was a tail. A professional tail. Caleb had hired a private investigator. But why? He knew where I lived. He knew where I worked. Then it hit me. He did not care about me. He was looking for the owner. He was looking for Aunt Meredith. I had told Caleb that Aunt Meredith was in Switzerland, but if he was desperate, if he was doubting my story, he would want proof. He would want to find her contact information or her legal guardian. Or perhaps he suspected I was lying about her location. If his PI followed me, he expected me to lead him to the aunt. If the PI found nothing, if he reported back that there was no aunt, and that the property records led only to me, the game would change. They would switch from manipulation to legal warfare. They would sue for the condo in the divorce, claiming it was a marital asset. I needed to keep the Aunt Meredith myth alive. I needed to feed the beast. I checked the time. It was 6:30. I pulled over to the curb and typed a quick search on my phone. Then I made a call to a local theater group I had supported during a charity drive last year. "Hello, this is Elena Sterling. I have a very unusual casting request. I need an older actress, someone who can play grumpy and senile, and I need her immediately." An hour later, I was driving toward the suburbs. The gray sedan was still behind me, keeping a respectful distance. I pulled into the parking lot of Sunny Meadows Retirement Home. It was a decent facility with manicured lawns and a secure entrance. I had arranged with the administrator, a woman who owed me a favor from my days on the hospital board, to borrow a private meeting room for an hour. I walked into the lobby. The actress was waiting. Her name was Mrs. Higgins. She was a formidable woman in her 70s with wild gray hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. She was perfect. I handed her a silk scarf and a pair of oversized sunglasses. "Here's the scene," I whispered as we walked to the visiting area near the window. "You are my Aunt Meredith. You are incredibly wealthy, incredibly stubborn, and you hate my husband. You refused to stay in Switzerland and demanded to come back to a local facility, but you want it kept secret. If anyone asks, you are not selling the condo, ever." Mrs. Higgins grinned. "I love a woman who knows what she wants. Let us do this." We sat by the large window that faced the parking lot. I positioned myself so my back was to the glass, but Mrs. Higgins was facing it. I saw the man in the beige jacket walking through the parking lot. He stopped near a tree and raised a camera with a telephoto lens. I leaned in and took Mrs. Higgins' hands. I looked earnest. I looked pleading. "Please, Auntie," I said loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, but mostly for the visual. "Caleb is in trouble. We need to sell the unit." Mrs. Higgins pulled her hands away violently. She slapped the table. "Never!" she shouted. Her voice was raspy and magnificent. "That boy is a leech. I told you he was a leech when you married him. He will not get a single dime from my estate. The apartment stays in the family." I put my head in my hands, feigning despair. The camera shutter clicked in the distance. "But Auntie, please." "No," she pointed a finger at me. "You tell him to get a job. You tell him if he asks again, I will write you out of the will too. Now get me my pudding." We played the scene for 20 minutes. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. Mrs. Higgins yelled. She threw a napkin. She looked imperious and unmovable. When I finally stood up and walked out, I looked defeated. I slumped my shoulders as I walked to my car. The man in the beige jacket was gone. He had what he needed. He had photos of me visiting an old woman. He had visual confirmation that Aunt Meredith existed, that she was local, and that she was hostile. I drove home with a small smile playing on my lips. When I walked into the apartment, Caleb was waiting in the living room. He looked agitated. His phone was in his hand. "Where were you?" he asked. "You are late." "I went to see Aunt Meredith," I said quietly, dropping my purse on the chair. He froze. His eyes darted to his mother, who was lurking in the kitchen doorway. "You saw her." "I thought she was in Switzerland. She was transferred back yesterday." I lied effortlessly. "There were complications with her visa. She is at a facility in Westchester. I went to beg her Caleb. I went to ask her about the house. And..." He took a step forward. His greed was so naked it was repulsive. "What did she say?" I looked him in the eye. "She said no. She said she would burn the building down before she let you sell it." Caleb face twisted. He turned red, then purple. "That old witch," he hissed. "That selfish old witch." Pamela walked into the room. She put a hand on his shoulder. "Calm down, Caleb," she said softly, but her eyes were cold and focused on me. "If she is back in the country, that changes things. It makes things easier." "What do you mean?" I asked. She smiled. It was the smile of the shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "It means we do not have to rely on letters anymore, dear. It means we can go visit her ourselves. We can explain the situation. I am sure one mother can speak to another, or in this case, one aunt." I felt a knot of tension. I had reinforced the lie, but I had also brought the target closer. They would try to find her. They would try to go to Sunny Meadows. But Mrs. Higgins was just a day player. She would not be there tomorrow. "I will not let you harass her," I said firmly. "Her heart is weak. The doctors said no visitors except immediate family." "We will see about that," Pamela said. I walked to the bedroom. I had bought myself some time. They believed she was real. They believed she was the obstacle. They would focus their energy on breaking a woman who did not exist instead of investigating the woman who did. But I knew this was just a temporary victory. The PI would report back where she was. They would go there. They would find out she was gone. I needed to escalate. I needed to force their hand before they realized the trail led nowhere. I needed them to make a move that was illegal, undeniably criminal. And thanks to the blue powder I had found in the bathroom trash this morning, I knew exactly how far they were willing to go. The atmosphere in the apartment had shifted from a Cold War to a strange, manic energy. When I returned home on Friday evening, I expected the usual sullen silence or the passive-aggressive clatter of pots and pans from Pamela. Instead, I found Caleb in the living room pacing back and forth with a terrifying bounce in his step. He was holding a bottle of expensive champagne. It was a vintage Dom Perignon that I had been saving for my 5-year promotion anniversary. He had popped the cork without asking me and was currently pouring it into 2 crystal flutes. "Elena, you are home." He beamed at me. It was the smile he used when we first started dating, the smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners and made me feel like the only woman in the room. But now, knowing what I knew about the 2 wives before me, that smile looked like the baring of teeth. "What are we celebrating?" I asked, putting down my briefcase. Caleb walked over and pressed a glass into my hand. His fingers were warm. "We are celebrating a breakthrough, babe. We are celebrating family." I took a sip of the wine. It tasted like ash. "I do not understand." "I did it," Caleb announced proudly. "I found her." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and waved it in the air like a winning lottery ticket. "I found Aunt Meredith." My heart hammered against my ribs. I kept my face perfectly still, a mask of confusion. "I told you she is in a facility in Westchester, Caleb. I told you that yesterday." "Yes, but you were being so vague about the details. You were protecting me, I know. You did not want me to see her in a bad state, but I knew we needed to fix this. So I made a few calls. I called every high-end care facility in the county. And guess what? Sunny Meadows confirmed they have a Meredith Sterling on their registry. I felt a cold sweat break out on my lower back. The private investigator must have tipped him off faster than I anticipated. Or maybe Caleb was more resourceful than I gave him credit for. "Sunny Meadows," I repeated. "Exactly." He grinned. "And here is the best part. I spoke to the front desk. They said visitation hours are open on weekends from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. No appointment needed." He took a large gulp of champagne. "So Mom and I have a plan. We are going there tomorrow morning. We are going to bring her flowers. Mom baked a blueberry pie. We are going to go in there and charm her, Elena. We are going to show her that her niece has a loving husband who just needs a little help. Once she sees how good we are together, she will sign the papers. I know she will." I looked at him and felt a wave of nausea. He was talking about ambushing a sick elderly woman. He was talking about manipulating a stranger into selling her home. But the real danger was the reality. If he went to Sunny Meadows tomorrow, he would ask for Meredith Sterling. The receptionist would tell him that Mrs. Higgins, who had played the role for 1 hour yesterday, was not a resident. Or worse, they would direct him to the empty room I had rented for the afternoon. The lie would evaporate. He would know I had staged the visit. He would know I was playing him. And then the legal war would begin before I was ready. "I cannot let you do that, Caleb," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Why not?" His smile faltered. "Because she is fragile. You cannot just barge in on a heart patient with a sales pitch and a blueberry pie. It is not a sales pitch. It is a family reunion." He stepped closer. His voice dropped an octave. "Why are you fighting me on this, Elena? Unless you are hiding something. Unless you do not want us to talk to her. I am not hiding anything." I lied. "Then we go tomorrow, 9 in the morning. I am driving." He turned away, dismissing me. He walked toward the kitchen where Pamela was humming to herself. I stood alone in the living room. My mind was racing. I had 12 hours. If I could not stop him by tomorrow morning, everything would fall apart. I needed an emergency exit. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I pulled out my burner phone, the one I had bought solely for communicating with Mark, the investigator. I sat on the edge of the bed and typed a text message to a number I had saved as Dr. Weber. It was actually my friend Sarah. We had set up this contingency plan 2 days ago just in case. Code red, call me in 5 minutes. You are the Swiss doctor. I deleted the message and hid the burner phone under the mattress. Then I took a deep breath and went back out to the living room. Caleb and Pamela were sitting on the sofa. Pamela had the blueberry pie on the coffee table. It looked perfect and wholesome, which made the situation even more grotesque. "So," Pamela said, looking up at me, "I was thinking I should wear my blue dress. Old ladies like blue. It is calming. Do you think your aunt likes blue, Elena?" I sat down in the armchair opposite them. I crossed my legs and tried to stop my foot from tapping. "She likes silence," I said sharply. "She likes privacy." "Well, she is about to get some company." Pamela smiled. "It will be good for her." My phone rang. It was my main cell phone sitting on the side table. The ringtone was the default standard ringing sound, but in the quiet room it sounded like a fire alarm. I picked it up. The caller ID said Zurich Medical Center. I had programmed Sarah's number under that name. I looked at Caleb. "It is the doctors," I said. "Answer it," he said eagerly. "Put it on speaker." I hesitated. This was the gamble. If Sarah messed up the accent or if Caleb recognized her voice, it was over. "No," I said. "It is private medical information." I answered the phone and held it to my ear, pressing it tight. "Hello? This is Elena Sterling." "Elena." Sarah's voice came through tinny and urgent. She was doing a clipped Germanic accent that was surprisingly convincing. "This is Dr. Weber. I am calling with urgent news regarding your aunt." I widened my eyes. I made my hand shake. "Doctor, is everything okay? I was just planning to visit her tomorrow." "That will not be possible, Mrs. Sterling." Sarah continued. "We had a critical incident 20 minutes ago. Her heart rate spiked dangerously. We believe she has suffered a secondary cardiac event. We have ordered an immediate emergency transfer." "Oh my God," I gasped. I covered my mouth with my hand. Caleb stood up, instantly alert. "What? What is it?" he asked. I held up a hand to silence him. "Where are you taking her, doctor? We are airlifting her to the specialized cardiac unit at Mount Sinai in Manhattan. She is in a coma. She is being placed in the intensive care unit immediately. No visitors allowed. Absolute isolation protocols are in effect for the next 72 hours. Her condition is critical. If she survives the night, it will be a miracle." "I understand. Please save her. Do whatever it takes. We will do our best. I will call you with updates. Do not come to the hospital. You will not be granted entry." I hung up the phone. I let it drop from my hand onto the cushion. I stared blankly at the wall, letting the silence stretch for 5 agonizing seconds. "What happened?" Caleb demanded. He was standing over me now. "She had a stroke," I whispered, "or a heart attack." "It is bad, Caleb. It is really bad. They are airlifting her to Mount Sinai ICU. She is in a coma." Caleb froze. "A coma. Yes. They said no visitors. Absolute isolation. If she survives the night, it will be a miracle." For a moment, I thought he might show sympathy. I thought that maybe, just maybe, there was a shred of humanity left in him that would care about a dying woman. But then his face changed. The concern vanished. The shock vanished. It was replaced by a red flush of fury that started at his neck and rose to his hairline. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "No," he said. His voice was a low growl. "Caleb, she is dying," I said. "No," he shouted. He spun around and grabbed the expensive crystal vase sitting on the mantelpiece. With a primal scream, he hurled it across the room. The vase smashed against the far wall, shattering into 1,000 jagged shards. The sound was explosive. "God damn it!" he screamed. "Caleb, stop!" Pamela stood up, but she did not look scared. She looked annoyed. He kicked the coffee table, sending the blueberry pie sliding off the edge. It splattered onto the Persian rug, a mess of purple goo and broken crust. We were so close. He yelled, pacing the room like a caged animal. We were going there tomorrow. I had the papers ready. I had the notary on standby. We were going to get the signature. He is not worried about her life, I thought. He is worried about his timeline. "Caleb, please calm down," I said, standing up and backing away. "You are scaring me. I do not care if I am scaring you." He turned on me, his eyes wild. "Do you realize what this means? Monday is the deadline. Monday. If I do not have that money by Monday, I am dead. And now she is in a coma. How can she sign papers in a coma?" "She cannot," I said quietly. Exactly. He slammed his fist into the wall. The drywall cracked under the impact. Why does everything have to be so difficult? He ranted. Why does she have to have a heart attack now? Today of all days. He looked at me with pure hatred. It was a look that stripped away the last 6 months of marriage. There was no love there. There was only the rage of a parasite that had been denied its host. Why will not that old bitch just die? The words hung in the air. He screamed it again louder this time. Why will not she just die? If she dies, at least we inherit the place. If she dies, we get the probate. But no, she has to linger. She has to be in a coma. She has to drag it out while I lose everything. I stared at him. I memorized this moment. This was the real Caleb Sterling. This was the man I had married. Pamela walked over to him. She did not scold him for wishing death on my relative. She simply placed a hand on his arm. "Quiet down, Caleb," she said sharply. "You are making a scene. She needs to die, Mom." He looked at her pleadingly like a child asking for a toy. "If she dies, Elena gets the condo. We can sell it immediately." "I know," Pamela said. Her voice was calm, soothing. "We just have to be patient. If she is in a coma, nature will take its course." They were discussing my aunt's death as a strategic advantage. They were standing in my living room, surrounded by broken glass and ruined pie, planning their financial recovery on the corpse of a woman they had never met. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. I was not just divorcing a liar. I was living with a sociopath. "I am going to bed," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. "I cannot listen to this. Go." Caleb spat. "Go cry for your aunt." I walked to the bedroom and locked the door. I pushed the heavy dresser in front of it. I sat on the bed and listened to him raging in the living room. I heard more things breaking. I heard Pamela's low, murmuring voice trying to strategize. I looked at the burner phone in my hand. I had bought myself 3 days. The isolation protocol would keep them away from the hospital until Monday. But Monday was his deadline. And when Monday came and he had no money, the violence I saw tonight would be directed at me. I needed to move faster. I needed to trigger the end game. I opened the hidden camera app on my phone. The camera in the living room was recording everything. It had captured the thrown vase. It had captured the hole in the wall. And most importantly, it had captured him screaming, "Why won't that old bitch just die?" I saved the clip. I backed it up to 3 different servers. Phase 1 was complete. I had exposed the monster. Now it was time for Phase 2. I needed to make him believe that killing Aunt Meredith was not the only way to get the money. I needed to offer him a shortcut that would lead him straight into a prison cell. The weekend passed in a haze of terrifying normalcy. After the violence of Friday night and the shattered vase, the apartment settled into an eerie calm. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the cannons had stopped firing, but before the bodies were counted. Caleb apologized on Saturday morning. He stood by the bed with a tray of breakfast looking like a penitent schoolboy. He blamed the stress. He blamed the fear of losing his company. He swore he did not mean what he said about Aunt Meredith. He kissed my forehead, and his lips felt cold. Pamela was even more solicitous. She took over the kitchen completely. She insisted that I rest. She said the shock of my aunt's coma must have been terrible for me, and I needed to conserve my strength. She made rich stews and heavy pastas. She brewed pots of aromatic tea that smelled of chamomile and something else I could not place. "You look pale, dear," she would say, smoothing my hair. "Drink this. It will help you sleep." And I did sleep. I slept for 12 hours on Saturday. I napped on Sunday afternoon. My limbs felt heavy as if they were filled with lead. My thoughts were sluggish, moving through my mind like swimmers in molasses. I attributed it to emotional exhaustion. I told myself it was the adrenaline crash after the week of hell. But then Monday came. Monday was supposed to be the day Caleb faced his creditors, but he seemed strangely relaxed. He had accepted the narrative that Aunt Meredith was on death's door. He was banking on an inheritance. He had probably stalled the concrete supplier with promises of a massive payout once the estate settled. I dressed for work. My hands were fumbling with the buttons of my blouse. I dropped my earring twice before I could secure it. Pamela was waiting in the kitchen with a travel mug. "Here is your coffee, Elena." She smiled. "I put a little extra sugar in it today. You need the energy." "Thank you, Pamela." I took the mug. I sipped it in the car. It was sweet, cloyingly sweet. By the time I reached my office on the 42nd floor, the world had started to tilt. I sat at my desk and tried to focus on the monthly variance report. The numbers swam on the screen. Columns of figures that usually made perfect sense to me danced and blurred. I blinked hard, trying to clear the fog. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache. At 10 o'clock, I had a strategy meeting with the CEO and the board of directors. This was routine for me. I was known for my sharp presentations and my ability to recall financial data without looking at notes. I walked into the conference room. I felt like I was walking underwater. Elena. The CEO nodded at me. Let us review the third quarter projections. I stood up to connect my laptop to the projector. My knees buckled. I caught myself on the edge of the table. Are you all right? One of the board members asked. I am fine, I mumbled. My tongue felt thick in my mouth. Just a little tired. I started the presentation. I heard my own voice sounding distant and hollow. I was speaking slower than usual, slurring slightly. I mixed up the revenue streams. I called the logistics division the operations division. Elena! The CEO interrupted me. His voice was sharp. I looked at him. His face was blurry. You just said our operating margin was 4%. The report says 14%. That is a massive difference. I squinted at the screen. 14. I giggled. It was a nervous, involuntary sound, but it sounded drunk. The room went silent. I looked around the table. 5 pairs of eyes stared at me with a mixture of confusion and pity. I think you should sit down, the CEO said quietly. He looked at my assistant. Get her some water, and maybe call a car to take her home. I was humiliated. I was the Iron Lady of finance. I was the woman who never cracked. And here I was giggling and stumbling like a novice. I went back to my office. I locked the door. I drank 3 glasses of water. I splashed cold water on my face in the private bathroom. The fog began to lift slightly after an hour, but the suspicion remained. I was not sick. I was not just tired. I knew my body. I ran marathons. I ate clean. This feeling of detachment, this heaviness in my muscles was chemical. I thought about the tea. I thought about the coffee. I thought about Pamela's sudden insistence on preparing everything I consumed. A cold stone of dread settled in my stomach. They were drugging me. They were not just waiting for Aunt Meredith to die. They were actively incapacitating me. They wanted me weak. They wanted me compliant. If I was confused and sedated, I would be easier to manipulate. Maybe they hoped I would sign a power of attorney in a daze. Or maybe they just wanted to make sure I did not fight back when they made their next move. I needed proof. I remembered the travel mug. I had left it in the car holder. There were still a few ounces left at the bottom. I left the office at 2 p.m, claiming a migraine. I took a cab to the parking garage, retrieved the mug, and then directed the driver to a private toxicology lab in Midtown. I had used this lab before for corporate drug screenings. The director owed me a favor. I handed him the mug. Test this, I said. My voice was grim. Test it for everything. Sedatives, opiates, antipsychotics. I will have the results in 2 hours, Elena, he said, seeing the look on my face. I went to a nearby hotel lobby and waited. I could not go home. I could not face them yet. I sat in a velvet armchair and watched the people passing by. Tourists, businessmen, couples holding hands. They looked so normal. Their lives seemed so simple. My life had become a horror movie. My husband and his mother were poisoning me. At 4:30, my phone pinged with an email from the lab. Subject toxicology report. Urgent. I opened the attachment. I scanned past the chemical breakdown to the summary. Positive for benzodiazepines, specifically diazepam. Estimated concentration suggests a dosage of 10 milligrams per 6 ounces of liquid. Note: this is a significant sedative dose capable of causing drowsiness, confusion, and impaired motor function. I stared at the screen. 10 milligrams. That was not a mistake. That was not an accident. That was a controlled dose meant to turn me into a zombie. They were drugging me with Valium. The betrayal I had felt before was nothing compared to this. Before it was about money. It was about greed. Greed I could understand. Greed was human, But this was physical assault. This was a violation of my body. They were altering my mind, risking my health, and sabotaging my career just to get their hands on an apartment. If I had driven the car this morning instead of taking the subway, I could have crashed. I could have killed someone. I could have died. And they would not have cared. In fact, if I died, it would solve all their problems. Caleb would inherit my assets as my husband. He would get the condo. He would get my savings. He would get the life insurance. The fear that had been gripping me for days suddenly evaporated. It was replaced by something else, something cold and hard and incredibly sharp. Hatred. I hated them. I hated Caleb with his fake smile and his greedy hands. I hated Pamela with her blueberry pies and her poison coffee. I was done playing the victim. I was done waiting for them to make a mistake. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I stood up. I felt steady now. The anger was a better stimulant than caffeine. I called my lawyer. "James," I said when he answered. "Elena, how are you holding up?" "Change of plans, James. We are not just filing for divorce. What do you mean?" "I have evidence of poisoning. I have a toxicology report proving they are dosing me with sedatives." There was a silence on the line. Then James spoke, his voice dropping to a professional whisper. "Elena, that is attempted bodily harm. That is a felony." "I know," I said. "We should go to the police immediately. We can have them arrested tonight." "No," I said. "No." James sounded shocked. "Elena, you are in danger. I am safe for tonight. I will not eat or drink anything they give me. But an arrest is too easy. If we arrest them now, they will claim it was a mistake. They will claim I took the pills myself. They will get bail. They will hire lawyers. It will be a long, messy battle. So what do you want to do? I want to destroy them, James. I want to catch them in the act of the ultimate fraud. I want them to sign their names on a document that proves their intent to steal millions. I want them to think they have won, and then I want to crush them." I outlined my plan. It was risky. It required me to go back into that house. It required me to pretend I was still the drugged, confused wife, but I was not confused anymore. I hung up the phone and walked out of the hotel. I hailed a cab. "Take me to Bayview Street, you." I told the driver. I was going home. I was going back into the snake pit. But this time, I was the one with the venom. When I walked into the apartment, Pamela was in the kitchen chopping vegetables. Caleb was on the sofa watching television. "Elena." Pamela wiped her hands on her apron. "You are home early. How was work?" I let my shoulders slump. I let my eyelids droop. I stumbled slightly as I walked toward them. "I do not know." I mumbled my words, slurring just enough to be convincing. "I felt so dizzy today. I messed up the presentation. I think I need to lie down." Pamela exchanged a look with Caleb. It was a look of triumph. "Oh, you poor thing," she cooed. "It is the stress. I will make you some soup, and more of that special coffee. It seemed to help you this morning." "Yes," I whispered. "Please, the coffee helps." I went to the bedroom and closed the door. I did not lock it. I wanted them to feel confident. I sat on the bed and waited. Tonight, I would pour the soup down the toilet. Tonight, I would dump the coffee in the plant pot. But tomorrow, I would hand them the rope, and I would watch with a smile as they tied the noose around their own necks. The decision to turn my home into a surveillance state was not an easy one. I had always valued privacy. I treated my home as a sanctuary where the outside world could not enter. But my sanctuary had been breached. The enemy was already inside the gates, sleeping in my guest room and cooking in my kitchen. On Tuesday morning, I waited until Caleb left for a site visit, and Pamela went to the grocery store to buy ingredients for another one of her poisoned meals. I called in sick to work. As soon as the elevator doors closed behind Pamela, I went to work. I had purchased the equipment from a spy shop in Midtown the previous afternoon. It was expensive military-grade hardware disguised as mundane household objects. I placed a digital alarm clock on the bookshelf in the living room. It looked like a standard black minimalist clock, but inside the display was a high-definition camera with a wide-angle lens and a microphone sensitive enough to pick up a whisper from 20 feet away. I replaced the smoke detector in the hallway outside the bedrooms with a unit that streamed video directly to a secure cloud server. Finally, I slid a tiny voice-activated recorder under the mattress of the guest bed where Caleb was currently sleeping. I tested the feeds on my phone. The picture was crystal clear. The audio was crisp. I was ready. That evening, I put on the performance of a lifetime. Pamela made a beef stew. It was thick and smelled heavily of rosemary and red wine. I suspected the strong flavors were there to mask the bitterness of the diazepam. I sat at the table and forced myself to eat a few spoonfuls while pretending to be struggling to keep my eyes open. "I am so tired," I mumbled, letting my head droop. "My body feels so heavy." "Eat up, dear," Pamela said, pushing the bowl toward me. "You need your strength. The stress is eating you alive." I managed to spit the meat into my napkin when she turned to the sink. I poured the wine into the potted plant when Caleb looked at his phone, but I acted as if I had consumed every drop. By 8 o'clock, I was lying on the velvet sofa in the living room. I let my arm dangle off the edge. I slowed my breathing to a deep, rhythmic pattern. I relaxed my facial muscles. To the naked eye, I was in a deep, chemical sleep. Caleb and Pamela sat in the armchairs opposite me. For the first 10 minutes, they watched the news in silence. Then Pamela spoke. "Look at her." Her voice was not the sweet maternal coo she used when I was awake. It was cold and hard like flint. "She looks pathetic," Caleb replied. He sounded bored. "How long do we have to keep doing this, Mom? The dosage is high. She is barely functioning." "We keep doing it until she breaks," Pamela snapped. "Do not be impatient, Caleb. Impatience is why you lost the farmhouse in Ohio. You pushed too hard, too fast. This one is smarter. This one is a professional. We need to melt her brain a little more before we hand her the pen." I lay perfectly still. My heart was pounding so hard against my ribs, I was terrified they could see it through my blouse. Ohio. They were admitting it. They were confirming everything the investigator had found. "So what is the timeline?" Caleb asked. "I cannot hold off the creditors forever." "Next week," Pamela said. "We will tell her the aunt took a turn for the worse. We will tell her the doctors need a signature for a surgery or a transfer. We will slip the power of attorney in the stack. She is so groggy she will not even read it. Once we have the signature, we sell the unit to Roy. We take the cash and we leave." "And Elena?" Caleb asked. Pamela laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "We leave her here. By the time she wakes up and realizes what happened, we will be in the Cayman Islands. Let her sue us. She will be a divorced, drug-addled woman with no assets. No one will believe her." I wanted to scream. I wanted to leap off the sofa and claw their eyes out. The cruelty was absolute. They did not just want my money. They wanted to leave me broken and discredited. Caleb stood up. I heard the rustle of fabric. "I am going to take a shower," he said. "This waiting is making me sweat." "Go," Pamela said. "I will watch Sleeping Beauty." I heard Caleb's heavy footsteps walking down the hallway. I heard the bathroom door close. I heard the lock click. A moment later, the sound of running water echoed through the pipes. I waited. Pamela was still in the room. Then I heard her stand up. I heard her footsteps moving toward the kitchen. The refrigerator door opened. The clinking of a wine bottle followed. She was pouring herself a drink. This was my chance. I opened my eyes. The living room was empty. Pamela was in the kitchen around the corner. Caleb was in the shower. I sat up silently. My movements were precise. Earlier that day, I had watched the camera feed from the guest room while I was pretending to nap in the master suite. I had seen Caleb come in from outside. He had gone to the closet and taken a small silver key out of his pocket. He had hidden it inside the toe of his running shoe, the blue Nike on the top shelf. It was a key I had never seen before. It did not belong to the apartment. It did not belong to his car. It belonged to the small fireproof safe he kept in the guest room closet. He told me he kept his business contracts there. He said it was boring paperwork. I slipped off my shoes. I ran on my toes down the hallway. I stopped at the bathroom door. The shower was running loud and steady. He was scrubbing away his guilt. I slipped into the guest room. It smelled of his cologne and stale air. I went straight to the closet. I reached up to the top shelf. My fingers found the blue Nike running shoe. I reached inside. Cold metal. I pulled out the key. It was small and silver with a jagged edge. I knelt on the floor and pulled the heavy black safe out from under a pile of sweaters. I inserted the key into the lock. "Please open," I whispered. "Please open." The key turned smoothly. The latch clicked. I opened the heavy door. Inside there were no business contracts. There were no blueprints. There was a stack of cash, probably $10,000 in hundreds. That was my money. Money he had siphoned from our joint account for expenses. Beside the cash were 3 passports. One was his current passport. The other 2 had his photo but different names. Caleb Vance, Caleb Smith. And underneath the passports was a black leather notebook. It looked expensive. I picked it up. My hands were trembling. I opened to the first page. The handwriting was neat and architectural. Block letters, precise spacing. At the top of the page in bold ink was the heading, "Target Elena Sterling." I felt the air leave my lungs. I turned the page. It was a plan, a detailed step-by-step operational plan. It was not the scribblings of a desperate man. It was the blueprint of a career criminal. Phase 1, infiltration. Timeline 3 months. Objective: establish contact. Mirror her interests. She likes jazz and Italian food. Create a persona of a successful but misunderstood architect. Play hard to get initially, then overwhelm with romance. Target is lonely. Target has no close family nearby. Vulnerability is high. I read the words and felt sick. Every date, every conversation, every shared laugh. It was all scripted. He had studied me like a lab rat. I turned the page. Phase 2, acquisition, timeline 6 months. Objective: secure marriage. Do not sign a prenup. Use emotional manipulation if she suggests one. Ideally elope or have a small wedding to save costs. Move into her residence. Establish residency rights. He had fought me on the prenup. He had cried. He said it meant I did not trust him. I had felt guilty, so I dropped it. He had played me perfectly. Phase 3, isolation and distress. Timeline year 1. Objective: create financial crisis. Isolate her from friends. Bring mother in as support. Introduce the idea of selling the asset. If she resists, utilize chemical assistance to lower defenses. Chemical assistance. There it was in black and white. Premeditated poisoning. I turned to the last page. Phase 4, liquidation and exit. Objective: sell the condo. Transfer funds to offshore accounts. File for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. If possible, frame her for financial instability. Disappear. My tears fell onto the page. I wiped them away quickly. I could not leave DNA evidence. This was not just a notebook. This was a confession. This was a roadmap of his malice. It proved that he never loved me. Not for a second. It proved that the moment he met me, he saw a $sign. I heard the shower stop. The water cut off abruptly. The silence was deafening. I had maybe 2 minutes before he walked out of that bathroom. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Steady, Elena, steady. I took a picture of the passports. Click. I took a picture of the cash. Click. I opened the notebook and photographed every single page. I made sure the text was legible. I made sure the heading with my name was clear. Click, click, click. I closed the notebook. I placed it back in the safe exactly where it had been. I put the passports on top. I put the cash next to them. I closed the safe door. I locked it. I stood up and shoved the safe back under the sweaters. I took the key and placed it back inside the blue running shoe. I wiped the safe handle with the hem of my shirt to remove my fingerprints. I ran out of the room. I reached the living room just as the bathroom door opened. I threw myself onto the sofa. I draped my arm over the side. I closed my eyes. I heard Caleb walking down the hall. He was whistling, a happy tune. He walked into the living room. "Is she still out?" he asked. Pamela was sipping her wine. "Like a light," she said. Caleb chuckled. "Good. I am going to have a drink. Being a mastermind is thirsty work." He walked past me. I could smell the soap on his skin. I lay there and listened to the clink of glass. I had the photos, I had the recordings, I had the toxicology report. I had enough to send them to prison for 20 years. But prison was not enough. They wanted to liquidate me. They wanted to take my dignity. I decided then and there that I would not just hand this over to the police. Not yet. I would let them execute their plan. I would let them walk into the trap. I would let them stand in front of a judge and lie. And then I would drop the hammer. I lay on the sofa, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. It was a small, imperceptible smile hidden against the cushion. You want phase 4, Caleb, I thought. You are going to get it, but it is not going to be the exit you planned. The doorbell rang at 7:00 on Wednesday evening. It was a sharp intrusion into the suffocating atmosphere of the apartment. I was lying on the chaise lounge in the living room, feigning the lethargy that had become my permanent state in their eyes. Caleb was pacing by the window, and Pamela was arranging fresh flowers in a vase replacing the ones Caleb had smashed days earlier. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice weak and raspy. Pamela smoothed her skirt. She looked too dressed up for a Wednesday night at home. She was wearing a stiff black dress and her pearls. "It is a friend, dear. Someone who might be able to help us out of this mess." She went to the door. I heard the murmur of voices, and then she returned, leading a man into the room. Tatahai. He was short and stocky, with a complexion that looked like uncooked dough. He wore a suit that was expensive, but ill-fitting, the fabric shimmering slightly under the recessed lighting. He carried a heavy briefcase and smelled of stale cigar smoke and aggressive cologne. "Elena, this is Roy," Pamela announced, gesturing with a flourish. "Roy is an old associate of mine. He specializes in rapid asset liquidation." Roy stepped forward and extended a sweaty hand. I did not stand up. I let my hand hang limp, offering him a weak shake. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Sterling," he said. His eyes darted around the room, assessing the value of the artwork and the furniture. "Nice place. Very nice. A bit dated in the finishes, but it has good bones." I pulled my hand away. "What is he doing here, Caleb?" I looked at my husband. Caleb came over and sat on the edge of the ottoman near my knees. He took my hand and squeezed it. His palms were damp. "He is here to save us, Elena. He is here to make an offer on the condo." I blinked slowly, acting as if the words took a long time to process. "But Aunt Meredith," I whispered, "she is in a coma. We cannot sell her house. We have to, Elena." Caleb said, his voice urgent and pleading, "Listen to me. The doctors called again while you were sleeping. The bills are piling up. The specialized care at Mount Sinai costs thousands a day. And my business is dead by Monday if I do not get cash. We are drowning." He was lying about the doctors, of course. Sarah had not called. But he needed a pressure point. Roy cleared his throat. "I understand the situation is sensitive," he said, opening his briefcase. "That is why I am prepared to make a cash offer. No banks, no inspections, no waiting periods. I can wire the funds to your account within 24 hours of signing." He pulled out a single sheet of paper and placed it on the coffee table. $1,200,000, he said. I stared at the paper. I stared at her. It was insulting. It was less than half of what the apartment was worth. Even in a fire sale, this unit would fetch $2 million easily. "That is too low," I mumbled. "It is worth double that." Roy shook his head, looking sad. "Not in this market, Mrs. Sterling, and not with the speed you require. Cash is king. This is a fair price for a distress sale." Pamela stepped in. "Elena, be reasonable. Think of Caleb. Think of your poor aunt. If she dies without paying her bills, the state will take everything anyway. This way we salvage something. We save Caleb's reputation. We save the family." I looked at the three of them, the vultures circling the carcass. Roy was obviously a plant. Probably an old crony from Pamela's disbarred days or a shady connection Caleb had dug up. They would sell it to him for $1.2 million. He would flip it a month later for $2.5 million. They would split the profit and I would be left with nothing. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but I pushed it down. I needed to sell the performance. I started to cry. I let the tears spill over my cheeks. I let my shoulders shake. I do not know what to do. I sobbed. I am so confused. My head hurts so much. Caleb stroked my hair. It made my skin crawl. Shh. It is okay, baby. Just trust me. Trust us. We are doing this for you. We are taking the burden off your shoulders. He picked up a pen from the table and held it out to me. Just sign the agreement to sell Elena. We will handle the rest. We will deal with the lawyers. We will deal with the hospital. You just need to rest. I looked at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc. My Mont Blanc. He had taken it from my desk. I reached out with a trembling hand. I took the pen. I looked at Caleb. I looked deep into his eyes, trying to find a shred of the man I thought I married. There was nothing there but greed and impatience. I cannot let you go to jail, Caleb. I whispered, my voice breaking perfectly. I love you too much. I will do it. I will sell the house. Caleb let out a breath he had been holding. Pamela clapped her hands together silently. Roy smirked. Thank you, Elena, Caleb said. You are saving my life. I leaned forward to sign. Then I stopped. Wait, I said. The room froze. The tension was palpable. What is it? Pamela asked sharply. I cannot sign this today, I said, wiping my eyes. Why not? Caleb asked. Because this is just a letter of intent. I sniffled. If we are doing this, we need to do it right. I need to get the original deed from the safe deposit box, and I need to say goodbye. Say goodbye, Caleb repeated. To the house. I cried harder. It was my aunt's pride and joy. I need 2 days. Just 2 days to pack her personal things and make peace with this decision. If I sign now, I will have a breakdown. I feel it coming. I started to hyperventilate. I gasped for air, clutching my chest. Pamela looked alarmed. She did not want me having a medical emergency that would bring real doctors into the house. Okay, she said, rushing over. Calm down, dear. Breathe. 2 days. I gasped. Friday. We sign on Friday. Caleb looked at Roy. Roy shrugged. Friday is fine, Roy said. As long as the paperwork is ready by noon. The wire transfer cutoff is at 2:00. Friday at noon. Caleb agreed. He took the pen from my hand. We will do it Friday. I sank back onto the chaise lounge, exhausted. Thank you, I whispered. I am sorry. I just need time. You take all the time you need. Pamela said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy again. You made the right choice, Elena. You are a good wife. Roy packed up his briefcase. I will have the formal contracts drawn up. See you Friday. He left. Caleb walked him to the door. I heard them whispering in the hallway, probably congratulating each other on a job well done. I closed my eyes and listened to the door click shut. Friday at noon. They thought Friday was the finish line. They thought they had won, but they did not know about Monday. While they were poisoning my coffee on Monday morning, I had already sent a secure packet to James, my lawyer. While they were plotting on Monday afternoon, James was standing in front of a judge in family court. He had filed an emergency motion for divorce. He had filed for a temporary restraining order freezing all marital assets. He had submitted the toxicology report proving the presence of diazepam in my system. He had submitted the video of Caleb smashing the vase and screaming about wishing death on my aunt. And most importantly, he had submitted a sealed indictment request for fraud and conspiracy. The judge had granted everything. The divorce papers were already served, but not to the apartment. James had arranged for a process server to be part of the surprise on Friday. And the police. James had met with the district attorney on Tuesday. When they saw the notebook, when they saw the Phase 1 through Phase 4 plan, when they saw the forensic accounting of the stolen funds, the DA was very interested. They wanted to catch them in the act. They wanted the attempted grand larceny charge to stick. So they agreed to wait. They agreed to let the sale proceed until the moment of signature. Friday at noon was not a closing. It was a sting operation. Caleb came back into the living room. He poured himself a drink. He looked lighter, younger. The weight of his debt seemed to have lifted. You did good, babe, he said, raising his glass to me. You really stepped up. I looked at him through my eyelashes. I just want us to be happy, Caleb, I said. We will be, he promised. We are going to be so happy. He drank his whiskey. I watched him swallow. Enjoy it, Caleb, I thought. Enjoy the victory lap, because in 48 hours you will not be drinking scotch. You will be answering questions in an interrogation room." I stood up shakily. "I am going to bed," I said. "Sleep well." Pamela called out from the kitchen. She was already looking through brochures for luxury cruises. I walked to the bedroom. I closed the door and locked it. I pushed the dresser in front of it again. I lay in the dark and counted the hours. 36 hours to go. 36 hours until the mask came off. 36 hours until I took back my life. On Thursday evening, I shed the skin of the victim. For the past 3 days, I had worn shapeless sweatpants and oversized t-shirts. I had shuffled around the apartment with unwashed hair and a face devoid of makeup, playing the part of the broken, drugged wife to perfection. But tonight required armor. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom. I had locked the door to ensure privacy. I applied a layer of foundation to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I painted my lips a deep crimson red. I brushed my hair until it shone like spun gold and pinned it up in a severe, elegant twist. Then I stepped into my dress. It was a black sheath dress with a high neckline and a dangerous slit up the thigh. It was the kind of dress you wore to a funeral or an execution. When I unlocked the door and walked into the living room, the silence was instantaneous. Caleb and Pamela were sitting on the sofa reviewing the final draft of the sale contract Roy had emailed over. They looked up, and their jaws literally dropped. "Elena," Caleb stammered. He stood up, forgetting to hide the paperwork. You look incredible, but I thought you were sick." "I am feeling better." I lied, my voice smooth and clear. "The fog is lifting, Caleb. I realize that if I am going to say goodbye to this life tomorrow, I should celebrate it tonight. I want one last evening of elegance before we become humble." Pamela narrowed her eyes. She did not like this. She preferred the zombie version of me. "Celebrate?" she asked suspiciously. "How?" "I invited a few friends for dinner," I said, walking over to the bar cart. "Just a small, intimate gathering, people who have meant a lot to me. I want witnesses to my new beginning." Caleb looked panicked. "Friends? Who?" "Elena, you should have asked me. We have a big day tomorrow. We need to focus." I poured myself a glass of sparkling water. "Oh, do not worry, darling. They are very discreet, and they will be leaving early. I just needed to see them one last time in this setting." The doorbell rang before he could argue further. I smiled at him over the rim of my glass. That must be them. I walked to the door. Caleb scrambled to hide the contract under a couch cushion. Pamela smoothed her hair, trying to compose herself. I opened the door. 3 people stood in the hallway. The first was James, my attorney. He was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Caleb's car. I had introduced him to Caleb once briefly at a gala 2 years ago, but I doubted Caleb remembered. To ensure confusion, I had told James to introduce himself simply as a consultant. The second was Mark, the private investigator. He looked rougher than James, wearing a leather jacket and dark jeans. He looked like exactly what he was: trouble. And the third was a woman. She was petite with blonde hair cut in a sharp bob. She wore a simple navy dress and a scarf around her neck. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. Her name was Susan. She was the Julianne from Sarah's report, the wife from Pennsylvania, the one who had lost her townhouse 7 years ago. I had tracked her down on LinkedIn, found her number, and begged her to come. When I told her what I was planning, she had driven 4 hours to be here. "Welcome," I said, stepping aside. "Please come in." Caleb walked forward, putting on his best host smile. "Hello, I am Caleb, Elena's husband." James shook his hand firmly. "James, a pleasure. I have heard so much about your business ventures." Caleb puffed up his chest slightly. "Good things, I hope." "Interesting things," James replied with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Mark did not shake hands. He just nodded and walked past Caleb, his eyes scanning the room as if he were looking for exits or weapons. Then Caleb saw Susan. He froze. His hand was still extended in midair. His smile faltered, twitching at the corners. He blinked rapidly as if his brain was trying to reject the image before him. Susan looked him dead in the eye. She did not smile. She did not scream. She just looked at him with a gaze of absolute Arctic loathing. "Hello, Caleb," she said softly. "It has been a long time." Caleb turned pale. A sickly gray color washed over his face. He looked at me, then back at Susan, then at Pamela. Pamela had gone rigid near the kitchen. She recognized Susan, too. I saw her hand grip the back of a chair so hard her knuckles turned white. "Susan," Caleb croaked. "What? What are you doing here? Elena invited me," Susan said, stepping further into the room. She said she wanted old friends to meet new friends. I walked over and looped my arm through Caleb's. I felt his muscles vibrating with tension. "You know each other?" I asked innocently. Caleb pulled his arm away sharply. We met a long time ago." "Briefly." "Briefly," Susan repeated. "We were married for 2 years, Caleb." The air left the room. I gasped, bringing a hand to my throat in mock surprise. "Married? Caleb, you never told me you were married before. You said I was the first." Caleb was sweating now. Beads of perspiration were forming on his forehead. "It was not a real marriage, Elena. It was a mistake. We were young. It lasted 5 minutes. It meant nothing." "It cost me my home," Susan said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor of rage underneath. "It cost me everything I owned." Caleb laughed nervously. It was a high-pitched, hysterical sound. Okay, this is awkward. Elena, can I speak to you in the kitchen? Now." "Not yet, darling," I said, turning away from him. "Dinner is served. I ordered from that French place you love. Let us eat." I herded them to the dining table. Caleb looked like he wanted to run, but with Mark standing by the door and James blocking the hallway, he had nowhere to go. He sat down. Pamela sat next to him, her eyes darting between the guests like a trapped rat. The dinner was a masterclass in torture. James asked pointed legal questions about asset forfeiture and fraud statutes. Mark told stories about catching con artists in the act. Susan just ate her salad and stared at Caleb. Caleb drank 4 glasses of wine in 20 minutes. He was unraveling. Finally, I tapped my spoon against my glass. The crystal rang out clear and sharp. "I would like to make a toast." I stood up. Caleb looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot and terrified. "To desires," I said, raising my glass, "and to the lengths people go to fulfill them." I looked around the table. There is a famous fable by Aesop, The Fox and the Grapes. We all know it, right? The fox sees a bunch of beautiful ripe grapes hanging from a high vine. He wants them. He craves them. He jumps, and he jumps, but he cannot reach them. I paused and walked slowly around the table, trailing my hand along the backs of the chairs. I stopped behind Caleb. In the original story, the fox gives up and walks away, saying the grapes were probably sour anyway. He lies to himself to save his pride. I placed my hand on Caleb's shoulder. He flinched. But there is a modern version of the story. In this version, the fox does not walk away. The fox is greedy. The fox is starving. So the fox decides to cut down the whole vine. He decides to destroy the garden just to get that one bunch of fruit. He brings his friends. He poisons the soil. He burns the roots. I leaned down and whispered into Caleb's ear. But the fox forgot one thing, Caleb. He forgot to check if the grapes were real. Because sometimes the grapes are just made of wax, and sometimes the gardener is watching him the whole time holding a shotgun. Caleb slammed his glass down. Wine sloshed onto the tablecloth. "Stop it," he hissed. "Stop talking in riddles." "You are drunk, Elena. You are embarrassing yourself." He stood up and grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, painful. "The party is over," he announced to the room. "My wife is not feeling well. The medication is messing with her head. Everyone needs to leave. Now." He yanked me toward the bedroom. "Come on, Elena. Go to sleep." I stopped. I planted my feet firmly on the floor. I looked at his hand gripping my bicep. Then I looked up at his face. I let the mask drop completely. The fear, the confusion, the weakness. It all vanished. My eyes went cold and hard. "Get your hand off me," I said. My voice was not slurred. It was not quiet. It was the voice of a CEO, the voice of a woman who commanded boardrooms. Caleb blinked. He looked confused. "What?" I said, "Get your hand off me, Caleb, or Mark here will break it in 3 places. Mark stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Caleb let go as if he had been burned. He stumbled back. You "You are not sick," he whispered. "No," I said, smoothing my sleeve. "I am not sick. I am not drugged. And I am not stupid." The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. The only sound was the humming of the refrigerator. Caleb looked at me. Then he looked at Susan. Then he looked at James, who was calmly taking a file out of his briefcase. He looked at Pamela. She was sitting frozen at the table, her face a mask of horror. They knew. In that second, the reality crashed down on them. The game was rigged. The victim was the predator. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. "Sit down, Caleb," I said. "We are not done with dinner, and we certainly are not done with the story." Friday morning broke with a sky the color of bruised iron. It was a fitting backdrop for the demolition of Caleb Sterling's life. I sat in the living room sipping a cup of black coffee that I had brewed myself. The bitter taste was reassuring. It was the taste of clarity. The apartment was quiet. Pamela had fled the night before, immediately after the disastrous dinner party, claiming she needed to check on her own apartment. Caleb had stormed out shortly after, unable to face the humiliating glare of his ex-wife Susan. He had spent the night at a hotel. I knew this because I was tracking his location via the family sharing setting on his phone, which he had arrogantly forgotten to disable. He thought he could still fix this. He thought that if he just showed up this morning with the notary and the contract, he could bully me back into submission. He thought the performance at dinner was just a hysterical outburst from a sick woman. He was wrong. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Caleb walked into his construction office in Queens. He was expecting a wire transfer from Roy. Instead, he was met by a process server. I was not there to see it, but James, my attorney, texted me the play-by-play. Served. He is reading them now. He looks like he's going to be sick. The packet contained a petition for immediate divorce, a motion for a temporary restraining order, and a copy of the forensic accounting report detailing his embezzlement. It also included a notification that I had filed criminal charges for attempted poisoning and fraud. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Caleb calling. I let it ring. He called again and again. 7 times in 3 minutes. Then the dot on the tracking app started moving. It was moving fast. He was driving toward Manhattan. He was coming for me. I checked the front door. The new deadbolt I had installed at dawn was engaged. The heavy steel bar I had wedged under the handle was secure. At 8:45, I heard the elevator ding in the hallway. Heavy footsteps pounded toward my door. There was no hesitation, no polite knock. I heard the metallic scratch of a key sliding into the lock. He tried to turn it. It did not move. He tried again, jiggling it violently. The tumblers did not catch because the lock he was trying to open was currently sitting in a dumpster 3 blocks away. "Open the door, Elena." His voice was muffled by the thick wood, but the rage was unmistakable. I walked to the door and stood 2 feet away. I did not look through the peephole. I did not need to see his face to know what he looked like. "Go away, Caleb," I said calmly. "You do not live here anymore. Open this goddamn door." He screamed. He slammed his body against the wood. The frame shuddered but held. "You changed the locks. You cannot do that. This is my home. I have rights." "You have no rights," I replied. "You are a guest who overstayed his welcome, and now you are a trespasser." I heard him kick the door. It was a dull, heavy thud. "You think you are so smart," he yelled. "You think you can just serve me papers and steal my life. I need that money, Elena. I need it today. You are going to sign those papers, or I swear to God, I will break this door down and make you sign them." I lifted my phone. I had already dialed 911. I pressed the call button. "Emergency services. What is your emergency?" "My name is Elena Sterling. I am at 1281 Bayview Street, Unit 22B. My estranged husband is currently trying to break down my front door. He is screaming threats. Is he armed, ma'am? I do not know. But he has a history of aggression. And I have toxicology reports proving he has been drugging me with diazepam for the last week to incapacitate me. I am afraid for my life." There was a pause on the line. The mention of poisoning changed the priority level instantly. "Officers are dispatched. They are 2 minutes away. Stay away from the door. Do not open it for anyone but the police, I understand. IQ." I hung up, but kept the phone in my hand, recording audio. Outside, Caleb was losing his mind. The desperation had stripped away the last veneer of the charming architect. "Elena, open up." He sobbed. He was crying now. "Please, they are going to kill me. The loan sharks, the suppliers. If I do not pay them, they will kill me. You have to help me. You are my wife. I am not your wife," I said, staring at the white paint of the door. I was just a target. Phase 3. Remember. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. He knew I had seen the notebook. "You went in my safe." His voice was a whisper of pure disbelief. "You went in my safe." "Yes," I said, "and I gave the photos to the district attorney." "You bitch," he screamed. The sound was primal. "You ruined everything." He threw himself against the door again. This time I heard the wood splinter slightly around the frame. He was going to try to batter it down. But then I heard the heavy boots on the stairs. I heard the crackle of police radios. "Police! Step away from the door. Hands where we can see them." I heard Caleb gasp. "Officers, wait. This is a misunderstanding. This is my apartment. My wife is having a mental breakdown. She is off her meds. Sir, turn around. Put your hands on the wall. Now." There was the sound of a scuffle, a grunt of pain, and the distinct metallic click of handcuffs. I peered through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers had Caleb pressed against the hallway wall. His face was mashed against the plaster. He looked sideways, his eyes wide with shock. "Mrs. Sterling," an officer called out. "The suspect is in custody. You can open the door." I undid the deadbolt and removed the steel bar. I opened the door slowly. Caleb looked at me. His suit was rumpled. His hair was a mess. "Elena," he pleaded, Tell them it is a mistake." I looked at the officer. I handed him the manila folder containing the restraining order, the toxicology report, and the deed to the apartment. "This man has been poisoning my food to force me to sign over my property," I said clearly. "I want to press charges for domestic violence assault and attempted grand larceny." The officer looked at the report, then at Caleb. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer recited as he hauled Caleb up. Caleb did not remain silent. As they dragged him toward the elevator, he twisted his head back to look at me. The hatred in his eyes was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who realized he had underestimated his prey. "I will get out, Elena," he shouted. "My mother will get me out." "Your mother is next," I said softly. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his voice. I stood in the hallway alone. My heart was beating slow and steady. I went back inside and locked the door. 1 down, 1 to go. The courtroom was cold and smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at my door. Caleb had managed to post bail on the initial domestic violence charge using the last of his hidden cash reserves. Now we were here for the final showdown, the divorce hearing. Caleb sat at the defendant's table wearing a navy suit that looked slightly too large for him now. He had lost weight. His skin had a gray pallor that spoke of sleepless nights and vanishing options. Beside him sat his lawyer, a man named Mr. Thorne, who was known for being expensive and morally flexible. In the gallery behind them sat Pamela. She was clutching a rosary beads, expecting sympathy from the universe she had spent a lifetime cheating. She glared at the back of my head with eyes that promised retribution. Mr. Thorne stood up to make his opening statement. He smoothed his tie and projected a voice full of righteous indignation. "Your Honor," he began, "my client, Mr. Sterling, is a victim of deception. He entered this marriage in good faith. He dedicated his time, his energy, and his professional expertise as a contractor to maintain the marital residence. He managed repairs. He oversaw renovations. He believed, based on his wife's own statements, that the property belonged to a wealthy relative and that he was securing their future inheritance." I watched Caleb nod solemnly. He was playing the part of the devoted husband who had been tricked. Mr. Thorne continued, "We are asking for an equitable division of the asset's value. We are asking for 50% of the current market appraisal or a cash settlement of $1 million to compensate Mr. Sterling for his sweat equity and the emotional distress caused by his wife's instability." My lawyer, James, did not object. He simply sat there with his hands folded on the table, looking like a shark waiting for a seal to finish swimming. When it was our turn, James stood up slowly. He walked to the center of the room. He did not look at Caleb. He looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," James said, his voice calm and leveled. "The respondent claims he is entitled to a share of the property located at 1281 Bayview Street because he believed it belonged to a fictional aunt named Meredith Sterling. He claims he contributed to its value." James paused and picked up a single document from his table. "However, the reality is quite different. The respondent did not contribute to the value. He and his mother actively devalued the property by removing custom window treatments and damaging the drywall in fits of rage. But that is irrelevant." James turned and handed the document to the bailiff. "The property in question does not belong to an Aunt Meredith. It never did. There is no Aunt Meredith. The entity known as Meredith Sterling does not exist. The property was purchased 5 years ago by the petitioner Elena Sterling. It was paid for in full 3 years prior to the marriage. It is a premarital asset owned solely and exclusively by my client." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Caleb's head snapped up. He looked at me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Pamela let out a sharp gasp from the gallery. James continued, "My client invented the relative as a protective measure, a stress test, if you will. She suspected the respondent was interested only in her wealth, and as the evidence will show, her suspicions were entirely justified." Caleb stood up. He forgot where he was. He forgot the judge. "You lied," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You lied to me for a year. You told me it was her house. Sit down, Mr. Sterling." The judge barked. I looked at Caleb. I did not shout. I did not stand. "I lied to protect myself from a predator," I said clearly. "And you proved me right. You were never trying to help my aunt. You were trying to rob a ghost." James then unleashed the avalanche. He submitted the black notebook. He projected the photos of the Phase 1 through Phase 4 plan onto the court screens. He played the audio of Caleb screaming, "Why won't that old bitch just die?" He played the video of Pamela discussing the timeline for my chemical incapacitation. And finally, he submitted the toxicology report. "Your Honor," James concluded, "this was not a marriage. This was a long con, a criminal conspiracy designed to defraud my client and shorten her life for financial gain. We have affidavits from 3 former wives of Mr. Sterling, all outlining the exact same pattern of behavior." The judge looked at the evidence. His face grew darker with every page he turned. He looked at the toxicology report for a long time. Mr. Thorne tried to speak. He tried to object. But he looked like a man trying to stop a tsunami with a paper umbrella. "The judgment is clear," the judge said, slamming his gavel. "The marriage is dissolved. The request for asset division is denied with prejudice. The petitioner retains all property." Caleb slumped into his chair. He looked defeated. He looked finished. But we were not done. As the judge finished speaking, the double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. 4 detectives in dark suits walked in. They were followed by 2 uniformed officers. They did not stop at the rail. They walked straight to the defense table. "Caleb Sterling," the lead detective said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit grand larceny and attempted aggravated assault with a deadly weapon." Caleb scrambled backward, knocking over his chair. "No," he stammered. It was just a plan. We never sold it." "You poisoned her coffee, Caleb," the detective said, spinning him around and slamming the cuffs onto his wrists. "That is not a plan. That is a felony." In the gallery, Pamela stood up to run. She made it 3 steps before a female officer blocked her path. "Niela Amara," the officer said, "you are also under arrest for conspiracy fraud and practicing law without a license." Pamela screamed. It was a high, piercing sound of indignation. "Get your hands off me!" she shrieked. "I am an old woman. I have a heart condition." The officer ignored her and clicked the cuffs tight. I stood up and gathered my purse. I watched them being led away. Caleb looked back at me one last time. His eyes were wide, filled with the terrifying realization that his charm had finally run out. He looked at the notebook sitting on the evidence table. His own handwriting had condemned him. I walked past him. I leaned in close so only he could hear. Phase 5. Caleb, I whispered. The victim wins. I walked out of the courtroom and into the bright sunlight of the hallway. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. The sentencing hearing was brief and brutal. The courtroom was packed with the victims of the Amara family, including Susan and the other women I had located during the investigation. We sat in the front row, a united front of survivors who had finally cornered the wolves. Caleb wept. It was a pathetic display of self-pity that moved no one. He begged the judge for leniency, citing his difficult childhood and his financial desperation. He tried to blame his mother, claiming she had manipulated him. But the judge had seen the notebook. He had seen the precise architectural planning of my destruction. Mr. Sterling, you viewed marriage not as a partnership, but as a demolition project. The judge said, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls. You plotted to destroy a woman simply because she had something you wanted. That is not desperation. That is predation. Caleb received 6 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for the first 4. Pamela fared worse. Her tears did not fool the court. Her history of disbarment and her role as the architect of the poisoning scheme painted a picture of a career criminal. She received 8 years. As the bailiffs led her away, she did not look at Caleb. She looked at me. There was no remorse in her dark eyes, only the bitter realization that she had finally picked a target who bit back. Justice was served. But for me, the end of the trial was just the beginning of the healing. I did not jump back into the dating pool. I was done with romance for a long time. The trauma of living with a man who had smiled at me while lacing my coffee with sedatives was deep. I needed to rebuild my trust in my own judgment. The court had ordered Caleb and Pamela to pay restitution. They seized Pamela's assets in Yonkers and liquidated Caleb's remaining equipment. It was not a fortune, but it was a significant sum. I did not keep a penny of it. It felt dirty to me. It felt like blood money. Instead, I used every dollar to establish a nonprofit organization. I named it Safe Haven. Its mission was simple. We provided forensic accounting and private investigation services to women who suspected they were being financially exploited by their partners. We helped them find the hidden bank accounts. We helped them background check the charming new boyfriends with no verifiable past. We helped them find the courage to protect what was theirs. Every time we exposed a fraudster, every time we saved a woman's life savings, I felt a little lighter. I was turning my nightmare into armor for others. 2 years passed. My life was quiet and productive. I worked hard. I ran in the park. I spent time with friends who knew the real me. But there was one shadow remaining. The apartment. My beautiful condo on Bayview Street still held the ghosts of the past. Every time I walked into the living room, I saw the wall where Caleb had smashed the vase. Every time I stood in the kitchen, I remembered Pamela standing there with her poisoned coffee. The heavy drapes were gone, but the energy was still heavy. It felt tainted. I decided it was time for a purge. I did not want to sell it. That would feel like letting them win. I wanted to reclaim it. I decided to gut the place. I wanted to tear down the walls they had touched. I wanted to rip up the floors they had walked on. I wanted light. I wanted air. I wanted a space that was entirely new. I hired an architectural firm recommended by a colleague. I specifically asked for someone who specialized in modern minimalist design. That was how I met Jack. He arrived on a Tuesday morning. He was not wearing a flashy Italian suit like Caleb. He was wearing jeans and a simple gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He had sawdust on his boots and a pencil tucked behind his ear. He was tall with calm, intelligent eyes and hands that looked like they actually built things rather than just stealing them. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, offering a firm handshake. "I am Jack. I hear you want to open this place up." "Elena," I corrected him. "Please call me Elena. And yes, I want to erase everything. I want to take down the partition wall in the foyer. I want to expand the kitchen. I want glass everywhere." Jack walked through the apartment. He touched the walls. He checked the load-bearing beams. He was quiet, focused, and respectful. He did not ask how much the place cost. He did not comment on the luxury. He looked at the structure. When we sat down at the dining table to look at the blueprints, I noticed him studying the deed and the original floor plans I had laid out. He traced a line on the paper with his finger. "You bought this 5 years before you got married," he observed. "Yes," I said, bracing myself for the usual questions about money. "And you kept it in your name solely, even during the renovation permits?" "Yes." He looked up at me. His expression was unreadable. "My ex-husband tried to take it," I said bluntly. I decided to be honest. I wanted to see his reaction. He tried to force me to sell it. He thought it belonged to my aunt. It was a whole scheme. Jack nodded slowly. He did not look shocked. He did not look greedy. "So you protected it," he said. "You held the line." "I did." He looked back at the blueprints. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "You are smart," he said. "I respect that. Most people fold under pressure. You built a fortress." That was it. No calculation, no flattery, just genuine professional respect. We started working together on the renovation. It took 6 months. Jack was meticulous. He listened to my ideas. He never pushed. If I said no to a design element, he accepted it immediately. He respected my boundaries. We started having coffee after the site visits. We talked about architecture. We talked about books. We talked about the city. He told me about his life. He was divorced too. No drama, just 2 people who grew apart. He spoke of his ex-wife with kindness. That was a green flag I had never noticed before. One day, as we were inspecting the new floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, he asked me out to dinner. "Not as a client," he said, "just as Jack and Elena." I hesitated. The old fear pricked at me. "I come with baggage, Jack," I said. "I investigate people. I check backgrounds. I have trust issues that take up a lot of space." "I know," he said. "I Googled you. I read about the Safe Haven Fund. I think what you do is incredible. Check my background, Elena. Check my bank accounts. Check my references. I have nothing to hide. I did check." And he was clean. We took it slow, painfully slow. We dated for a year before I let him stay over. We dated for another year before we talked about the future. He never asked to move in. He had his own place, a loft in Brooklyn, that he had renovated himself. He respected my independence because he valued his own. 5 years after the nightmare ended, I stood in the foyer of my apartment. It was finished. The heavy walls were gone. The space was flooded with golden afternoon light. The dark memories had been scrubbed away, replaced by clean lines and white oak and breathing room. I looked at myself in the massive mirror that hung by the door. I saw a woman who had been tested in the fire and came out made of steel. I saw a woman who had refused to be a victim. Jack walked up behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist and rested his chin on my shoulder. He did not try to own the space. He simply shared it. "It looks beautiful," he whispered. "It does," I agreed. "It is yours, Elena," he said. "It always was." I smiled at my reflection. Yes, it was mine. My home, my life, my victory. I had learned the hardest lesson in the hardest way. But standing there in the sunlight, I knew it was worth it. I was safe. I was loved. But most importantly, I was free. The moral. In a world that often teaches women to be agreeable, my story is a reminder that silence is not always a virtue. Sometimes it is a weapon. Trust is a gift you give to others, but intuition is the gift you give to yourself. Never ignore the quiet voice that says, something is wrong, even if it speaks against the person you love. Protecting your assets, your peace and your future is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect. True love will never require you to sacrifice your security. Be smart, be strong, and remember you are your own best protector.